more to us than what we share with friends. Everything we do is for the ones we care about each day. In the Twin Cities we will stay for friends. WCCO TV for friends. WCCO TV for friends.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Moore and Doug Moore.
At the outset, and in response to the myriad phone calls we receive every night at 10:30, we would like to make it clear at this time that we are not related.
Don't let him kid you. I'm too young to be his father.
We're very pleased to see such an impressive gathering with us tonight. We thank you very much for being here. We are honored by the presence of Mayor George Latimer, the Honorable George Latimer, the Mayor of St. Paul, Mayor Al Hofstede of Minneapolis. Al, just because you've given up the ghost, you don't have to make yourself scarce, you know. He's about many civic and county officials, business leaders, officers of the court. Governor Quee was here, took his leave early to attend to some business at the state capitol. How much do you suppose that's going to cost us? Also visiting from New York, Mr. Al Massini, the president of Telerep, and members of Mr. Massini's staff. The WCCO television family, both past and present, and of course, all of our friends. We're very happy and very proud that you would accept our invitation to be with us tonight.
And why are we all here? All of you, David, myself, this magnificent Minnesota orchestra. On the surface, we're all gathered here to pay tribute to a couple of numbers, the numbers 4 and the number 30.
Now, in the news business, you know undoubtedly that the number 30 has a very special significance, because dating back to some obscure time in the history of news writing, this became a tradition for the reporter to signify the end of his news story by writing the numeral 30. Such is not the case this evening. The 30 that we celebrate tonight is certainly not the end of the story.
If this were the 30th anniversary of a marriage who we were celebrating this evening, most of you might be thinking, isn't it nice that they've stayed together all this long? Well, Channel 4 is certainly held together, and we hope you agree that this is very nice. But in this television business, the 30th anniversary might still be what they consider a honeymoon. Sure, we've overcome a few obstacles together, but the real challenges may still be to come.
Rather than pay a superficial tribute, then, to the numbers 4 and 30, we prefer to consider this evening a tribute to people. All of those people who have made the number 4 meaningful and the number 30 possible. And we're going to begin, of course, with the hundreds of thousands, and we'd like to think, presumptuously enough perhaps, millions of people out there who have been watching us all these years.
During Channel 4's 30 years on the air, one generation has watched television grow up. The other generation has grown up watching television. But all of us in this business have done some growing up in the last 30 years.
Indeed we have, and we just stopped to look and see at what the television industry has become today, because to many of us, July 1st, 1949, seems only like yesterday. That's when Channel 4, with a sum total of 26 employees, first went on the air. The FCC established that date as the deadline for Channel 4 to get on the air, and after much scrambling, the deadline was beaten by just 6 hours. The very fact that there was a deadline at all may be attributed to the efforts of one F. Van Konynenberg, whom many have called the father of Channel 4.
And while this is a tribute to people on both sides of the television screen, the story of Channel 4 can't be told without reference to equipment and technology. On July 1st, 1949, that amounted to one studio camera, a film camera, 2 mobile unit cameras, and a projector. Channel 4 signed on at 3 p.m., took a half-hour break from 6 to 6:30, then signed off at 9 p.m. And at this same time, the station was making the move from the Wesley Temple building to the corner of 9th and LaSalle.
So this was not an auspicious start. But after all, TV was only a toy at that time, and we must keep in mind that in 1949, there was no way for a station way out there in Minnesota to receive and transmit signals from New York. All programming had to be live or on film.
And with those resources, Channel 4 squeaked through those 6 months in the 40s when it was first on the air. Next came the 50s, a decade of incredible change for television in general and Channel 4 in particular. Before we get down to some specifics of the 50s, let's settle back and we're going to get into the mood of the 50s. And we're going to remember them through the Minnesota Orchestra under the direction of Henry Charles Smith. Maestro? Now's the time, Ollie.
Sorry for
They
jumping
stopped
the
playing.
queue.
We're up here. That's all there is to it, okay?
I recognize Ellington. Doug recognizes Elvis. Bashing right along, September 30, 1950, coaxial cable pushing west reached the Twin Cities.
And you know, Dave, 1950 was not really so very long ago, but I can listen to the event, list that as really tying in with earlier pioneer milestones like the railroad and the telegraph.
Actually, the coaxial cable was a very significant coming. Channel 4 then could pick up live network programs from both the ABC and Dumont television networks, both of which had early affiliations with Channel 4, and of course from the CBS television network, an affiliation, as we all know, that was much longer lived.
But still live programming.
Or crude kinescopes filmed off the cable screening of live programs.
But how about news?
At first, Channel 4 presented newsreels every Friday night, not unlike the newsreels you saw in the movie theaters with the film titles and the background music and the da-da-da-da-da kind of thing. Then we leased a wire photo machine, and a very elegant man named John Ford. Many of you may remember him from the WTCN radio days. Cliff Ryan, John Ford, began delivering a daily 5-minute newscast called Close-Ups in the News, and we advertised it saying you could actually see it as he told it. Bill Wigginton summarized the newsreels and wire photos on Sunday evenings. Jim Boyson forecast the weather, and both Raleigh Johnson and Dick Siebert, who was just beginning his long tenure as the University of Minnesota baseball coach, read the sports news.
And Chick McCoon became Channel 4's news director in 1951. WCCO TV had a newsreel at noon and another at 6:10 with a headline summary at 10:30. Chick wanted to turn all three of these into newscasts. This brought up an interesting question at that time. What is a television newscast? Do you show whatever interesting pictures you can find and talk about them, or do you deliver the news supplemented by whatever pictures you can find?
Just about this time, Gordon Bartouche was hired as the first Channel 4 photographer, and that was to lead to at least part of the answer. The station bought a black and white film processor. We call it the Houston. Actually, more affectionately, we called it Big Ugly. And a fellow named Don Potratz cut camera to airtime to a mere 30 minutes. And then in addition to that, we lifted clips from the newsreel footage that we had, such as the clip of the Korean peace negotiators walking in and out of the tent. And as you'll recall, that story went on for months, and whenever the story was mentioned, we'd run the film over and over again, and no one knew the difference.
That's still not bad, but it was still a toy.
Television now was beginning to lose some of its toy image. In January 1951, when the Minneapolis schools were closed by a strike, Channel 4 responded. For 2 hours each morning, the studio was turned over to selected pupils and teachers who went through the lessons on the air. They figured an estimated 30,000 students watched voluntarily. As a matter of fact, we can say voluntarily, many of the students wrote in asking for more.
Well, if television was a toy, it was a most valuable toy. And that brings us to August 17th of 1952, the date that Channel 4 became WCCO television.
Until this time, Channel 4 had been WTCN TV. But CBS, at the same time, owned a WCCO radio. CBS wanted a television station in the market. As a result of a merger and the formation of a new company, Midwest Radio and Television Incorporated, WCCO Radio and WTCN Television came under the same ownership, and the call letters became WCCO Television. Is that clear? Now, at this point, it's appropriate time to give credit to a couple of other people who are to help forge the WCCO Television of today. Bless his soul, the late William J. McNally, chairman of Midwest. Henry Dornsife joined the company in 1952, but he became the company's chief financial officer. And Robert Ritter was the president. And at this point, I have to stop and tell a little anecdote. In 1970 or 71, the WCCO radio announcing staff went on strike. Roger Erickson, Charlie Boone, Steve Cannon, all those highly paid performers over there went out on strike. Mr. Ritter and Larry Haig, who later became vice president and general manager, assumed many of the announcing duties. Haig got up there one day ahead of Ritter. Ritter walked through the picket line, went up there, and Haig said, "I just walked through the richest picket line in radio history." Rader said, "Welcome to the richest announcing staff." And now Robert Ritter, hold on to your hat, folks, is getting paid for doing radio and television commercials and voiceover for industrial films. So it all worked out fine. Well, okay, following this transaction, WTCN Radio and the WTCN TV call letters went their separate ways.
The remainder of the 50s was a period of real growth and change for WCCO television. New equipment, new technology, expansion of Radio City Theater Building, which is the home of the station and its studios, and people. I never knew Cedric Adams, although he was there in my home at 12 noon every day. But his legend is certainly interwoven into the fabric of the Upper Midwest and WCCO TV.
Cedric Adams, an institution for so many years, with his 10 p.m. news on WCCO Radio, Cedric Adams pioneered, formed the concept of the 10 o'clock news, much as we know it today. And of course, you know the old story. Pilots flying over rural Minnesota reported they knew exactly when it was 10:15 because all the people waited up to collectively turn off their lights at the same time. We would like to presume that the pilots may have had watches too, but this is the story they tell. Cedric then would be one of the very few people who worked for both the separately operated WCCO Radio and WCCO Television. In his first TV news show was on WCCO Television in 1953, and even though this first newscast did not go all that smoothly, his secretary, Bernie McGill, came through the studios the next day passing out $50 checks and thank yous from Cedric for jobs well done. So Cedric Adams was not easily forgotten.
Good evening. There's a happy household in rural Ramsey County tonight, happier than most because, as they say, all is well that ends well. The camera of WCCO TV cub reporter Joe Sullivan tells the story.
And also in 1953, Senators Ed Thigh and Hubert Humphrey pressed a key in Washington, D.C. to signal WCCO TV's power increase to 100,000 watts. We were only the fourth station in the nation to operate with this maximum power under FCC rules. On June 30th of 1954, WCCO Television was the host station to pool feed the total eclipse of the sun to both CBS and to NBC. And in October of 1954, WCCO Television broadcast the first local live program in color. A one-camera telecast of Axel and his dog.
Axel McClellan Card, of course. How appropriate that he, too, should be a part of our milestone tonight. How many of us grew up with this wonderful, talented performer? How many of us remember him with so much love and so much affection today?
Hi, kids. This is Axel. Happy Sunday to you. It's about 10:30. It should be, around where you live. Oh, say, I know a poem. Would you like to have me recite the poem? Oh, this really is good. Now, here it is. Would you like to hear it? There was a rat, and there was a cat. Now the cat is fat, where the rat is at. Ain't that good? Oh, quit hitting me, quit hitting me. Boy, these are Rasserinos, aren't they? Keep sending them in. We like to hear from you kids, you know. Knock-knocks and riddles and all of them things. Keep sending them right into old Axel here on Canal 4, will you? But here the jelly bean hopped upon my windowsill. Cocked his shining eye and says, "What did you do with the keyhole, little Bo?" Peep. Ain't that right? Oh.
Barry Davies was to join Cleland in 1958 and be his ever-present on-air partner until his untimely death. And in case you didn't recognize him, Axel's puppet was none other than Don Stoltz Incognito.
So many names come to mind from that era of live television. Arlie Heberly, whose employment with the WCCO TV's parent company, the old WTCN, dated way back to 1937. Arlie was the hostess for one of the first local live television programs, and I remember it particularly well because it was my first day on announce booth duty in that July of 1950. Bill Metchnick was the director in the control room, and the announcer had a book in his booth with the copy in it like this. And the theme came up for Around the Town, and Bill cued me, and I read, "Good afternoon. Welcome to Around the Town with Arlie Haberly, Arlie intro's guest and Q's first commercial." Remember? That was but the first of many monumental goofs that were to come. We don't mention the night I was making a pitch for Del Monte asparagus tips. Didn't come out that way. Suffice it to say that Del Monte had the dubious distinction of having one of the most short-lived advertising campaigns in television floor history. Mentioning other people in that era, Gwen Harvey, who was one of the loyal staffers from the start of Channel 4 and stepped in when Arlie Haberly passed away.
And so important to what WCCO television is today were these other contributors to that special on-air personality during the live era of the 50s. Dick Enroth and Bob Casey, who took over sports when Raleigh Johnson took over the news directorship. Gene Gott, who rewrote Chick McEwen's copy to make it sound less Democratic. And Don Padilla's copy to make it sound less Republican. Remember Jack Hastings, Mel Jass, Jane Johnson, Harry Siles, who worked both sides of the camera, Ed Scott, who played while his wife Peg sang. There are so many others that are not mentioned, and we just don't have time to mention, plus all of the unsung heroes off camera who helped to get WCCO television off to a good start.
Doug, we have to mention two more. In between there sometime in the early 60s was Dick Enroth. Dick Enroth was made his name, of course, as the trigger-mouthed, extremely capable play-by-play commentator of Miller's and Lakers games, joined our staff. He created the Enrothisms, one of which was, "The rain is coming down in a precipitous manner." Also want to take a moment to mention here the lady who hired me in July 1950. She was our program director, Judy Bryson. Judy, are you here? I thank you, the whole family thanks you, and I hope you're still exercising that same good judgment, Judy. We've had fun here with the shortcomings of the 50s, but those were the natural shortcomings, of course, of a very complicated industry that was still in its infancy. WCCO television closed out the decade by winning the University of Missouri and the Encyclopedia Britannica Award as the Outstanding News Film Station of the Year. Videotape machines were being installed to end the live era as we knew it, and of course to herald new opportunities for the 60s. The 60s, as remembered for us now by the Minnesota Orchestra. Well, WCCO television entered the 60s the same way it left the 50s, by winning a few awards. In 1960, the Radio Television News Directors Association named WCCO the winner for Outstanding Reporting of a Community Problem.
And in 1961, WCCO Television won broadcasting's highest and most significant award, the George Foster Peabody Award for Meritorious Local Public Service Programming.
The 60s at WCCO TV was a decade of technological advancement under the guidance of our longtime chief engineer, John Sherman. In 1962, our technical crew was responsible for the origination of a Telstar communications satellite broadcast live from the Black Hills. New, specially built equipment for all three studios and master control. The FCC finalized its grant for television towers at Shoreview, new color switchers, new color cameras, a color film processor, a 40-foot mobile cruiser, and videotaping capability second to none.
Toward the end of the 60s, Larry Haig, the longtime Mr. WCCO Radio, moved up to Executive Vice President and then to President of Midwest. He joined Van Konynenberg on the executive committee of the corporation, and at that time, Sherm Headley, longtime assistant to Van, took over as WCCO TV's general manager. And of course, we must pay tribute right now to the dedicated engineers and the technical people of the decade who were responsible for these and many other tremendous achievements. Although we shouldn't leave the impression that the 60s was a decade that was solely dedicated to the electronics of the business. For instance, in November of 1962, a brash youngster, actor, booth announcer, variety show, and Bolorama host, so confident in his 5 years as anchorman that he threw caution to the wind, and he decided that he would actually go on the air with the programming of Anchorman.
Fiery host with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and a hearty
Happy New Year!
The son of bedtime news. From out of the past come the blundering footsteps of the great newsmakers. Return with us now to those thrilling days of yesteryear, when a masked man, disguised as a mild-mannered anchorman for Channel 4, and his faithful film editing companion, Finberg, fight a never-ending battle to bring news, weather, and sports to the old Northwest. The bedtime news rides again.
Oh, boy, big deal.
And now, here's your host.
That stupid show ran for nearly 10 years. I took more abuse from that stupid show.
And now your host for this stupid show, Dave Moore.
I don't know why we can't leave well enough alone.
The first, thank you. That program was on the air 5 years before it even got a number in the ratings book. Mr. Van Konynenberg, heard about it from his friends at the Minneapolis Club. We were trying to prosecute the end of our involvement in the Vietnam War. And Mr. Van Konynenberg didn't act with lightning speed. 2 years later, he mentioned it to me. What the hell you doing on Saturday nights, he said. My first damaging reaction of the first program came from my mother, who had not seen the program, but a neighbor had. She told my mother about it, and the next day my mother called me and said, "Were you drunk on the air last night?" Well, let's move on.
This is the first time I heard about Bolorama, so... On January 8th of 1968, The Scene Tonight was first telecast with Bud Krahling's weather, Hal Scott's sports, Skip Loescher was on Action News, George Rice's editorial comment, and anchorman Dave Moore.
No question, that was a very big moment in my life, but there was someone else that Doug mentioned there, somebody who has been as much of the fiber of WCCO TV as anybody, in fact, perhaps even more. That was a Freudian slip, Bob, friends, and you're coming up next. This is a good time to mention that person, a propitious time, because he has been in the employ of this station longer than any living person. He started with... In 1946, with the old WTCN radio and the old Wesley Temple building, and he's been with us ever since. Bud Krahling. It was worth it to stick around just for that, wasn't it? I want to take a second to tell you how Bud Kraling became our weatherman. And this is a story that Robert Franzen, the current manager of WCCO television, enjoys telling, so we'll tell it here. Bob Franzen, very capable, very competent, was our weatherman in 1952. He made the rather questionable decision of taking a vacation. Bud filled in for 2 weeks and 27 years. And as you know, very well know, Mr. Franzen went on to a fate that none of us deserve. Bud has stood in front of that weather window in spite of obscene gestures from 9th Street. He has risked his very life atop that tottering shell weather tower. He's been a rock to work with. He's just an honor to work with, and he's been a dear, dear friend.
Over the last 30 wonderful years, there have been a number of attempts to make me laugh while I was in the middle of one of my wonderful partly cloudy forecasts, such as a cameraman appearing in a Halloween mask looking from behind his camera, somebody setting fire to my weather forecast off camera. I even heard one time there was an envelope of money being held in escrow that would go to the first person that could make me laugh on the air. Well, I did once, but I did it all by myself. Dave and I were talking about the opening of the bow and arrow deer hunting season in Wisconsin, and we said it was going to be a rather cool morning. And I said, it'll be okay if you keep your quiver warm.
Well, WCCO television has enjoyed more than its share of people like Bud Kraling who've joined the station and have stayed on. And I guess when newcomers like myself come along, we have to be impressed with any operation that can keep such good people sticking around for so very long, especially since television is such a come-and-go type of a business. WCCO television has had its share of people who have come and who have gone, but who have left their marks indelibly imprinted on the station's history.
So we're going to conclude this tribute to the 60s with a special thanks to some of those people who made the decade what it was. Many of you will remember Roundy Coughlin, who was predicting sports outcomes long before Bronco, certainly not quite as fetching as Sue Cox, our current Bronco. Don Dahl, if you're here, didn't we just see you doing a commercial, looking better, more physical than ever, sounding better. Randy Merriman, the irrepressible Randy Merriman. It was such a delight to have worked with him after he decided to leave the network. Dean Montgomery, one of the really grand voices and grand people of all Twin Cities broadcasting. And Nancy Nelson, bless her little heart, married into the family, still works over there. But she, weather never looked better later in the evening. We remember the late Don O'Brien. There were a few tasks that he could not perform on television. The late Dr. Reuben Youngdahl, Dr. Reuben Garnetskin. We simply just don't have the time. We've missed so many people, we know that. And to all of you, we thank you for a magnificent 60s.
And for giving us the momentum for even greater accomplishments in the 70s. And let's hear now how the Minnesota Orchestra recreates our present decade for us. Isn't this a magnificent orchestra? You know, David, if we had this much talent, we could work for a living, huh? This is a fantastic evening with these people. The 70s, the computer age at WCCO television.
In 1971, WCCO television added broadcast computer services, which used a large-scale control data computer to handle scheduling, sales, traffic promotion, public service, and accounting. And it was a wonderful device because nobody knew who to blame for the screw-ups.
It's been a decade of even more incredible technological progress for WCCO television, and the decade isn't even over yet. Slow motion, stop action, remote control scheduled playback of cartridge commercials, portable live color.
And on July 7th, 1973, a new Shoreview tower was completed, giving WCCO TV a 35% signal increase to reach a total of 2.75 million viewers. On August 16th, 1976, MTC Properties, which from the old WTCN days had owned half of 53% of Midwest, acquired 100% ownership of Midwest Radio and Television. Clarence L. Mulrooney became chairman of the board, and Mr. Tom Dorr president. On October 1st, 1976, James M. Rupp joined Midwest as its executive vice president and chief operating officer. And since we are celebrating birthdays this evening, we wish a very special happy birthday to our board chairman, Mr. Clarence L. Mulrooney, who celebrated number 90 last month. Mr. Mulrooney.
And as of October 4th, 1977, I started reliving the history of WCCO television in the first person.
How well I remember, Doug. Our news went to two-anchor person, and that gave rise to the stations There's More and More and More on Channel 4.
I was supposed to add a touch of dignity to this team.
And youth.
Okay. As were Mike Fairborn, Pat Miles, and Don Shelby, who joined us shortly thereafter.
This brings us up to 1979. Let's put it in its proper perspective. ABC moved from York Avenue to Boone Avenue.
No. NBC moved to Boone. The Independent was over on University.
Oh, no. ABC is on University because the Independent was on Boone.
Which leaves us
tied closer than ever to CBS, and we're very thankful for that. CBS is well represented here this evening. I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to our special guests who have come in tonight, especially for our birthday party, and we ask them to stand and be recognized. Mr. Gene Jankowski, the president of CBS Broadcast Group. Mr. Jankowski. How are we doing so far, Mr. Jankowski? Fine, thank you. You know, got to know where your bread's buttered on, don't you? James Rosenfield, president of CBS Television. Mr. Gene Mader, vice president and assistant to the president. Mr. Mader, thank you for being with us tonight. Steve Somer, Vice President of Advertising and Promotion for CBS Entertainment, and his wife, Linda. Barry Richardson, CBS Vice President of Press Information. Monica Leahy is Manager of Affiliate Relations for CBS Press Information. Monica, thank you for being with us.
Peter Herford, Director of Affiliate Relations, CBS News. And a very friendly face around the Twin Cities, on the road and CBS Sunday Morning, Charles Corral. From CBS Entertainment, a familiar face on Sunday night on Channel 4, from Alice and Mel's Diner, Vic Tabak. And another bright addition to Sunday night from the Jeffersons, Marla Gibbs.
And a new face to the CBS lineup in the fall, but you will have met him previously. You saw him in Superman as Lois Lane's friend Jimmy Olsen. He's Mark McClure, star of California Fever. Gosh, Lois, what do we do now? I got an idea, Jimmy.
And speaking of the networks, we've got to get back to some of our own people. There are those who left because of offers, well, that they just couldn't refuse. And here's a tribute to both the caliber of people who work at WCCO television and to the excellent taste of the CBS network news directors.
Sam Ford, CBS News, Miami.
Bob McNamara, CBS News, Rotterdam.
Phil Jones, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Don Cladstrup, CBS News, Paris.
Susan Peterson, CBS News, London.
And also with CBS News, Jerry Bone in Rome, Quint Neufeld and Barry Peterson in Los Angeles, and Susan Spencer in Washington.
And we don't wish to leave you with the impression that all of the good ones have left WCCO. As we, thank you. That really is nice to hear, ain't it? As we lose so many good people to the network, we find more. And we also like to think that some of our best ones also chose to stick around. People like John Gallus, who joined Channel 4 in 1950 and saw no reason to leave.
During the 30 years I've been with Channel 4, I played a variety of roles, from newscaster and weatherman to commercial presenter. But the one that gave me the most satisfaction was that of Clancy the Cop for just about 20 years. And as my sidekick, a most talented gentleman, Willie Ketchum, better known as Alan Lotsberg.
Thank you, sir. It was in August of 1962 that I donned this costume, and every morning we would open with a song. Remember how that went?
See if I can find the key. Good morning, it's grand to be on hand. Good morning to you.
You know, if we change that to evening, that might go with the 10 o'clock report, huh? Another WCCO television veteran holds two distinctions. He hosts the longest continuous running show on Channel 4, which also happens to be television's only aviation program. That, of course, is Sherm Bowen.
In the early days of live television, I went on the air at 12:15. One day, the schedule was printed wrong, showed airtime at 12 o'clock. I was in the studio getting ready at 12. The camera came on, and the director said, "You're on." Well, I'd prepared material for only 15 minutes of film and pictures and an interview with a guest who was waiting in the lobby. In fact, I hadn't even talked to her yet. Of course, I couldn't leave the studio. Remember, it was all live. Somehow, I got a message away to bring the guest in, and she had some small kids with her, and I even interviewed them about how they like to fly. I filled 30 minutes with 15 minutes of material. I'm sure it wasn't very good.
1 year after the start of Sherm's program, in 1954, a cherubic cheek kid named Bill Carlson joined our staff. Bill, at the ripe young age of 16, had been a page for Cedric Adams at WCCO Radio.
It was the fall of 1951 when I started as a CBS page boy along with a young man by the name of Robert Vaughn at WCCO Radio. He moved on to Hollywood to become the man from U.N.C.L.E. I stayed here to work with such people as Cedric Adams and Randy Merriman, who curiously both preceded me here at the noon slot on Channel 4. It's been a terrific 28 years for me here at WCCO, 30 years for Channel 4, and we're both looking forward to many, many more.
Hal Scott joined the Sportscast in 1962. Then there was Ralph John Fritz, who came along in 1968, and Al Austin in 1969.
Excuse me for being late. I'm known as the man who's always tardy here at Channel 4. I remember back in 1968, my first time on the air, first time doing the sports on television. We were doing the scene tonight then, remember, Monday through Friday, it ran for 40 minutes. Well, I was working on a Saturday. And at 10:30, I think I have plenty of time, but they're calling for me to do the sports. And I look at the elevator, it's inoperable. Can you imagine inoperable here at Channel 4? So I run up 4 flights of stairs, wide open, get on the set. I was so out of breath I couldn't speak. Dave Moore had to ad-lib for 4 minutes before I could even breathe. And that's the way it was then. Matter of fact, Martha Stanville, our promotions director, is going to kill me because I was late for this meeting. Matter of fact, I'm late for another one. Excuse me.
So 30 years, 120 awards, and several hundred fine people later, WCCO television now is about to enter the 80s.
And I believe that the momentum we built up in the 70s will lead WCCO television to accomplishments that we haven't even imagined yet.
And if I may just place an all too brief mention here for our public affairs unit, which through its quality programming in the last 8-9 years has brought tremendous recognition to WCCO television, and in the same breath pay recognition to the this current management and the management that preceded it for giving that public affairs unit carte blanche to focus in an equality way on the problems that beset the Twin Cities here. I don't believe that there is another management of another television station in this country that gives such an opportunity to focus on the programs in the community as our management does to our public affairs unit. And if we're looking ahead, we can say that whatever our accomplishments might be in the future, it will be because of people. The people that we have mentioned here this evening, and the people, of course, whose names we have not had time to mention, but who have made tremendous contributions to the success of this station. People of WCCO television, very dear, dear friends, all of them.
And thank you, you most talented people in the orchestra tonight, and thank you out there for being with us, and we want you to go out of here and eat and drink and have a good time. Thank you very much.
Happy 30th birthday, Channel 4.